So you want to understand what card advantage is. You've probably heard these terms used loosely at your locals or larger events, where a card or a player in general is +1 or -1 against their opponent. So let's talk about this. We're talking about card advantage. We have to break this down into two main entities: hand advantage and field advantage. So let's talk about hand advantage first. As you know, within the game of Magic, you start with 7 cards in your hand. So that means you have a net 0 advantage over your opponent. Since you both have 7 cards, it's the same amount of cards. You don't have any advantage over your opponent. Now, the first thing I'm going to go over is what is a net plus. Harmonize is a +2. Now you might be wondering, why is it only a +2? Harmonize is a card that allows you to draw 3 cards. And that is because Harmonize needs to be used up in the process. When you cast Harmonize from your hand, it is on the stack. So let's say you have 7 cards in hand. When you cast Harmonize, you go to 6 cards in hand while it was on the stack. When Harmonize resolves, it allows you to draw 3 cards, so you go up to a total of 9 cards in your hand. Since you originally had 7 in your hand, and after Harmonize resolved, you went up to 9, that is a +2 advantage. So net advantage is basically when you neither gain or lose. An example of this would be Fauna Shaman's ability. Fauna Shaman allows you to discard a creature and then search your library for a creature and put it into your hand. Since you are putting what you put into it back, and you're not gaining any amount of cards, it is a 0 advantage. Finally, let's talk about a minus. So, not all cards that are minuses are bad cards. We have here Worldly Tutor, Mystic Tutor, and Enlightened Tutor. These cards, although they are very good, are actually -1s, since they are cards that are in your hand that are being exhausted, and then the card is going to the top of your deck, which is an inaccessible place that is not calculated by card advantage. So when you cast these cards, you are technically going -1, since if you have 7 cards in your hand, and your opponent has 7 cards in your hand, and you cast one of these tutors, you now have 6 cards in your hand. Now, like I said, card advantage is calculated by the difference between yours and your opponent's total card pool. So, let's look at Mind Twist. Mind Twist is a card that allows you to pay X amount of mana, and your opponent has to discard X random cards from their hand. So, with Mind Twist, if you play black and 0, the card is an inherent -1 on you, since you are playing Mind Twist and nothing is happening. If you play Mind Twist for 1, you are using your Mind Twist going -1, and your opponent is being forced to discard a card as well. You are both being reduced to 6 cards in hand. So, Mind Twist X2 would be a +1. Mind Twist X3 would be a +2, etc., etc., etc. Now, anytime you play any card within the game of Magic, that is an inherent -1 to your hand advantage, since the card needs to be exhausted in some way, shape, or form. Now, the other main entity to calculating your card advantage is board presence. Anytime a card is added to your board, you essentially are gaining advantage within your board presence, but it is not gaining you card advantage, since the card was more than likely already in your hand, so it was already being calculated into your total card pool. So, for example, Karmic Guide is a +1, since the card is being put into play and it allows you to put a creature from your graveyard back into play. It is generating you 1 extra card, which means it is a +1. When calculating card advantage with the field, this is when it gets a little trickier, because this is where you have to do math and is dependent on your current situation within the game. So, for an example, we have Wrath of God and Day of Judgment. Now, these cards are inherent -1s if there is nothing on the field, since they both destroy all creatures. If there is no creatures on the board to start with, then you are just wasting a card. It is just a card that is in your card pool that is going to the graveyard. And for each creature that you destroy of your own, that you're not destroying of your opponent's, you are receiving another -1. But when you turn it the opposite way, say you have no creatures and your opponent has 4 creatures, now Day of Judgment and Wrath of God is a +3, since it is 1 card being used to get rid of 4 cards. Now, one of the most notable ways to change board presence and gain an advantage is through combat. Combat directly affects your card advantage. So, if I attack with Elish Norn and Massacre Worm blocks, then Massacre Worm has died. So, the player who had control of Elish Norn is now +1 against their opponent with their board state, since they just got rid of a card for free. One thing to keep in mind too is that most players are very worried about their life total, especially when they're in the casual setting. Now, your life total actually does not matter until it hits 0. As long as it's not 0, you have not lost the game yet. So regardless of if your life goes up or down, that does not have an effect on card advantage. A good example of this would be Sylvan Library and Necropotence. Cards allow you to draw additional cards at the cost of life. Life is a resource. Life is not something that you have to protect and keep as high as you possibly can. And if you're able to turn life into card advantage, then that is very, very good. Now, to further elaborate what I'm talking about, let's do a test hand. So, we play Windswept Heath. We have gone -1 in our hand, but +1 to the board. So, in total, we have not gained or lost any advantage. Now, when we crack Windswept Heath to go get our Temple Garden, then we are still at 7 cards. We have not gained any advantage, and we have not lost any advantage. And when we cast our Birds of Paradise, we still have not lost any advantage, and we have not gained any advantage. So let's say we played this a little different, and we keep our mana open instead. And then our opponent goes, and they play a Mother of Runes. We have 2 options here, Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile. So, as far as card advantage goes, when we used Swords to Plowshares on the Mother of Runes, we have not gained or lost any advantage, since we are trading away 1 card for 1 card. But, say we use the Path to Exile instead. Well, now we are going -1. Now, why is this? The cards are essentially the same. Well, that's because Path to Exile allows your opponent to get a land from their deck. While we are exhausting and trading away this 1 for 1, our opponent is now able to get another card from their deck and put it into play. Having an understanding of these net gains and these net losses are important for gameplay, since these numbers generally determine who will win and who will lose the match. Now, this is not always the case. You do not have to play for card advantage, but it is extremely important to understand what this card advantage is. So thank you all for watching this video. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below, as well as if you want me to explain anything else as far as game mechanics go, competitive Magic, I'm more than willing to make a whole nother video. If you guys have any questions on anything about this game, feel free to leave a comment, leave a like if you enjoyed this video. If you learned something, definitely leave a like, show it to your friends. All the support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.